me bruhi sunishchitam. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sanyasa Karma Yogascha Nishreyasa Karavabhav Tayostu Karma Sanyasat Karma Yoga Karma Yogo Vishishyate. The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work and devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work and devotional service is better than renunciation of work. Neya sanitya sanyasi yo nadvesti nakankshati nirdvandvo hi mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated. O mighty armed Arjuna. Sankhya yogo pitak balaha pravadanti napanditaha ekam apyastita samyag ubhayor vindate phalam. Only the ignorant speak a devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the result of both. Yat Sankhyae prapyate stanam tadyogair apigamyate ekam sankyam chayogam cha ya pashyati tapashyati. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. Sanyasastu mahabahu dukham aptum mayogataha yoga yukto munir brahma na chirenad digatshati. Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. Yoga yukto vishuratma vejitatma jitendriyaha sarva buddhatma bhutatma kurvanapi nalipyate. One who works in devotion, who is pure, a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tatvavit pashan srinvan sprishan jigran ashnan agaschan swapan swasan pralapan visrijan grinan unmisan nimisan napi indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dharayan. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening, or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam chaktva karoti yaha lipyate nasapapena padma patram ivam bhasa. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as a lotus leaf is untouched by water. Kayena manasa buddhya kevalair indriyairapi yogina karma kurvanti sangam chaktvatma shuddhaye. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. Yukta karma phalam chaktva shantim apnoti naistikim ayukta kamakarena phale sakto nibadhyate. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukam vasi navadhare pure dehi naiva kurvan nakaryan. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. Nakara kritvam nakaramani lokasya srijati prabhu nakarma phala samyogam swabhavastu pravartate. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Nadate kashachit papam nachaiva sukritam vibhuhu agnaneva vritam jnanam tena muyanti jantavaha. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Yanena tutad agyanam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham aditya vajgyanam prakashayati tatparam. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. Tad bhudayas tad atmanas tan nishtas tat parayanaha gacchanta punar avritim jnana nirduta kalmashaha. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. Vidya vinaya sampane brahmane gavihastini shunishaiva saphakke cha pandita samadarshinaha. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog eater, and a dog eater outcasts. Ihaiva tair jita sarvo yesham samye stitam manaha nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmad brahmani te stitaha. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the condition of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Naprarishyat priyam prapya nodvijet prapya chapriyam stira buddhir asammudho brahmavid brahmani stitaha. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is situated, always situated in transcendence. Bhaya spashaktatma vindatyat mani yat sukam sabrama yoga yuktatma sukam akshayam ashnute. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Yehi samparsajai bhoga dukkha yonaya evate ajantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Shaknoti haivaya sodham prak sharira vimokshanat kama krodod bhavam vegam sayukta sa sukhi naraha. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. Yonta sukontar aramas tatantar jyotir evayaha sayogi brahmanirvanam brahma bhuto digaschati. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Labhante brahmanirvanam rishaya kshina kalmashaha chinna dvaidha yatatmanah sarvabhuta hiterataha. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Kamakroda vimuktanam yatinam yatta chetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Sparshan kritva bahir bhayams chakshus chaivantare bruvaho pranapano samo kritva na sabhyantara charino yatendriya manobuddhir munir moksha parayanaha Vigatischa bhaya krodho yasada mukta eva saha. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the internal and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Bhoktaram jagyat tapasam sarvaloka maheswaram suridam sarvabhutanam gatvamam shantimirchati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. This ends chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita, entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Yes. I will, with your kind permission, just say a few words, and we will have some time for some questions. In the beginning of the chapter, there is reference and discussion about Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya is known as the analytical study of the material world. And of course, yoga, especially Bhakti Yoga, is that direct engagement of the spirit soul, actually, in service to the Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada explains that actually there is no ultimate difference between Sankhya and Yoga, because Sankhya is meant to bring us to this highest level of yoga. As we know in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about different forms of yoga, but emphasizes how bhakti is the culmination of all yoga. So if one properly takes up Sankhya, he must come to this level or platform of bhakti. And if one immediately takes up bhakti, within bhakti, as one progresses, as one becomes purified, then one will be able to understand and appreciate also all the knowledge that is contained within Sankhya. Because by nature, Krishna, he is described as Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachit Ananda Vigraha, Sat, eternal chit full of knowledge. So for one who is a practicing devotee, all knowledge in due course of time actually becomes available to that practitioner. So this is in the very beginning of this chapter explained. Also in verse 7, how to work and not be entangled. Because very often people think that taking to spiritual life means not to work. But Krishna rather gives the opposite instruction to Arjuna, that you have to work. Your work, of course, is the work of a Kshatriya, but you work in devotion. So what is indicated here by Srila Prabhupada is that we should work with a particular consciousness. We should be pure in our thought. We should be pure in our actions. And that is only possible when we actually make an effort to control our mind and our senses. In one of the purports to, yes, text number 9, Prabhupada makes reference to 5 factors that are necessary for making any activity or undertaking successful. And they are as follows: the doer, the work, the situation, the endeavor, and the last one, which is the most important actually, Prabhupada translate here as fortune. In other places, he directly mentions the Krishna factor. In other words, we may be doing so many things and we may feel that everything is being done properly, but if it is somehow not sanctioned by Krishna, not ordained by Krishna, then it won't happen. So for a devotee, of all the factors, that remains the most important, naturally, because there are so many things we are unaware of. But Krishna, he knows when something should be coming out according to our expectation. And of course, this brings up the point which majority of people in the world experience great frustration because they are attached to the results of their activities. So in text number 9 or 10 rather, the instruction by the Lord is perform your duty, but without attachment. Surrendering the results of those activities to Krishna. It also mentions in text 13 about how to live happily in what is called the city of 9 gates. We have 9 gates, 9 holes in the body. How can these, how to live in harmony in the city of 9 gates? And that is by following these principles of being conscious of our original nature, by controlling our mind, controlling our senses. This comes up, of course, all the time. And then in text 17, Prabhupada, well, the verse actually explains how we should learn to fix 4 things or direct 4 things towards Krishna. Our mind, our intelligence, our faith, Shraddha, and Prabhupada here mentions refuge, means our dependency, knowing and understanding that our only refuge and our only solace is actually Krishna. 2 of the most important verses that are often quoted by Srila Prabhupada is text number 18, Pandita Samadarshinaha. Only one who develops this mentality, spiritual mentality, transcendental mentality, can learn to be unaffected or undisturbed by the ongoing challenges that this material world is presenting to all of us. And in text 23, there is mention of the need to tolerate the urges of our material senses. Toleration is mentioned in many different places as well. And the last 2 verses, how to become free from fear, anger, and desire, which of course is only possible by taking up to this practice of Krishna consciousness. Again, controlling our mind and our senses and directing our activities. Prabhupada very interestingly explains that actually the living entity, we are the living entity inside the body. We don't create good and bad, nor does the Lord create good and bad, nor is he responsible for good and bad. What creates good and bad and all of the conflicts and dualities that arise from that is our non-compliance to our original self, our original identity. In other words, this also clearly explained, it is due to the modes of material nature are forcing individuals who are not God conscious, not Krishna conscious, to act in so many ways. So in other words, it is only when we rise above, when we learn to rise above these modes of material nature. And of course, it is especially the process of bhakti that enables one to rise above these modes of material nature. And in that state, one, of course, will no longer be fearful because he'll be situated on the transcendental platform. And one will be able, one of the foremost instructions given by grandfather Bhishmadev, how to control one's anger. We have many angry people in the world today because they are lacking this knowledge and this understanding. And of course, Krishna summarizes this whole chapter in the last verse by mentioning very well instruction. Prabhupada refers to this verse as the peace formula. The peace formula is to know that Krishna is the bhokta or the enjoyer, that Krishna is the Maheshwara, the Mahaishwara, the supreme controller, and that Krishna is the Suridam Sarvadayinam. He is our real and foremost friend and well-wisher. So that translation, a person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, the Mahaishvara, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, such a person attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So actually in all the chapters, Krishna is giving Arjuna various instructions how to become relieved from the pangs and dualities of this material world. And that is only possible by transcending these dualities, by transcending the modes of material nature, and by transcending also the threefold miseries of life. So, of course, I realize in every single chapter there are so many instructions that are given, and generally we spend time on one instruction, and even within one instruction there's so many different aspects as well. So these are a few comments I am sharing, and I believe it is our Prananath Prabhu Pavitra who is possibly able to control or identify who might be having some comments to make or possibly some questions on the subject matter of Karma Yoga or action in Krishna consciousness, which alone can resolve the problems that we all experience here in the material world. So, yeah. So I'd like to open it up now for any possible comments or questions. We have a quiet group today.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. May I ask a question?
Hare Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank
Yes.
you for the wonderful recitation and such a nice explanation. I had a question that we have to do our work, we do not have to renounce it. So how do we know our prescribed duty? Do we fall under Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahmana? So how do we understand our work?
Okay. We basically have two levels of duty. Our primary and foremost duty is to be servants of Krishna, isn't it? Jiver Sarup Hoy Krishna Nitadas. Now, what service we should be doing, let's say, because you're making reference to the different Varnas, what particular activity we should be taking up, that can best be understood by, well, in two ways. One is the more clearly we read, study, and understand the Shastra, that will help us to understand what is meant to be our duty. And secondly, it is a practice in our Vaishnava tradition to always seek the good guidance and blessings from senior Vaishnavas, isn't it? And we especially need it in modern day society because the whole world is very upside down, very mixed. We are living in an unnatural setting. Vedic culture, for example, advocates that we should be living close to the land, close to cows. This is the recommended lifestyle that Krishna is giving to humanity. And this is a lifestyle that is meant to be the standard lifestyle. But unfortunately, in the last few hundred years, we have changed that in a major way. So it makes it more difficult actually for us to understand what should be our role, our work within society. And therefore, the need to do these two things that I mentioned. One is to hear on a regular basis from Srila Prabhupada's books, where he very nicely, especially in certain sections, I'll mention one of them, the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. From chapter 11 to 15, the last 5 chapters of that canto, canto 7, Narada Muni gives a very wonderful presentation on Varnasrama Dharma, actually, which, if anyone, actually, we should read it not only once, but 3 times. That is our Vedic system. By reading it 3 times, what we may have missed the first and second time will become more clear. So in addition to reading, as I mentioned, one can ask either one spiritual master, or one can ask senior Vaishnavas who can help one understand how one should be engaged within society. These are the general guidelines. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Any other questions?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. Here is Rajavidya. So here I have one.
Who is speaking?
Rajavidya Das.
Oh, okay. I thought you were quoting the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Rajavidya. Okay, welcome. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. So here in 5th chapter, after this, you explained that like Sankhya Yoga and the Bhakti Yoga, and ultimately those 2 paths reaches the ultimate goal.
Yes.
So in our Bhakti Yoga, we have found the ways from our acharyas, that Navavida Bhakti Yoga and all other process which we know. So
Yes.
in general, for Sankhya Yoga, what are the ways which we can identify that it is comes under Sankhya Yoga? So generally in Mayavadis or in general, there are many other ways. So will that falls under the Sankhya Yoga, or like how we should identify this belongs to Sankhya Yoga?
Okay, good question, because we definitely don't want to become Mayavadis, right? So Srila Prabhupada mentions that actually there are there were two historically known persons who taught Sankhya. Lord Kapila is the one we follow, of course, because he is Vaishnava, and not the other, who is not Vaishnava or atheist or Mayavad. So how to know is by hearing it or studying. Anything that we hear, anything that we study, we should first ascertain the source of that knowledge we are hearing, the source of that knowledge we are reading. As we know, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warned us very strongly to avoid any kind of literature that is not presented or written by Vaishnav Acharyas. So, as a matter of fact, Lord Chaitanya had his personal secretary, Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami, who would verify and check the content of any literature before presenting it to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So how to recognize? Well, we should know the source. We should know from whom we are receiving this understanding. And the basic criteria is that if that analytical study, because Sankhya means analytical study of this material world primarily, if it is not leading us towards the ultimate goal or destination, which is coming to that realization beyond Brahman realization, beyond Paramatma realization, but attaining Bhagavan realization, then we should be avoiding such type of literatures. So the criteria is two things: from where this knowledge is coming from, who is speaking this knowledge, what books are presenting this knowledge. All the knowledge that we need in terms of Sankhya. As a matter of fact, in the Kautilya Arthashastra, which is giving an introduction to the what is called Chatur Vidya, the four basic sciences that all Vaishnavas are meant to study, the four basic sciences which are meant to be the basis of traditional education, in particular Gurukula. The first of those four sciences is what is called Anvikshiki. And Anvikshiki is divided into three. One is Sankhya, one is Yoga, and the third is in reference to debate or logic. So in other words, both Sankhya and Yoga is presented by personalities who are known to be Vaishnavas, or who are in line with the conclusion of our Vaishnavas. If we are not knowing this, then we should avoid hearing such knowledge, because there's so many books of knowledge that are there, especially here in India. So in other words, we have plenty of literatures in our Sampradaya, in our Vaishnava Sampradaya, beginning with Bhagavad Gita, which speaks about Sankhya, and especially Srimad Bhagavatam that also deals with Sankhya philosophy. So we just need to stick to those sources, and then we will be secure.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Prabhu. Haribol.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yes, Prabhu.
Please accept my humble obeisance at your lotus feet.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm Lakshmi Narasimhadas. Guru Maharaj, one question, it is like, is it be possible to get the love of the Godhead only with the Bhakti Yoga, or is it also possible with the other process of yogas like Karma Yoga or Gnana Yoga or Dhyana Yoga? Is it also possible to get the ultimate goal, or is it possible only with the Bhakti Yoga?
Okay, good question. We know that all of these different types of yoga are discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. Karma, Jnana, Astanga, all of which are meant to actually cultivate in bhakti, because bhakti is described, as I'm sure you have read, as the topmost yoga system, and as a complete yoga, because bhakti introduces us to the science of rasa, rasa, which is based on transcendental relationships. So when we perform bhakti, we also perform activities which falls in the category of karma yoga. Karma yoga, it depends in which consciousness we perform those activities. When we perform them, as nicely indicated in this chapter, without attachment and for the pleasure and satisfaction of Krishna, then we are performing those activities properly, and we will gradually be able to get the desired result. So we all know also in the Bhagavad Gita, in the last chapter, Krishna explains that we should abandon all kinds of activities where there is any tinge of material affinity, and simply engage in unalloyed, pure devotional service to Krishna. So our line, our Vaishnav line of practice is very clearly, very strongly as well, emphasizing bhakti as actually the culmination. But bhakti is not simply something emotional. Within bhakti, there is activity. Within bhakti, there is also knowledge. And that verse is very nicely explaining this point in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayad Ahaitukam. So this verse and many similar verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam emphasize how by performing bhakti, bhakti to Vasudev or Krishna, Vasudeve Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga is emphasized, then all knowledge needed will actually manifest, because knowledge is already there within our hearts, and all detachment, vairagya, will also manifest. So we do not reject activity. We do not reject knowledge. They are contained within the science of bhakti. They actually become, let's say, the perfection of karma, the perfection of activity, the perfection of jnana, knowledge, is attained when we come to that platform of bhakti, or devotional service to Krishna. Is that helpful?
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Very well. We have a few minutes if anyone has further questions.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam. This is
This is-
Shovanand Haridas.
Okay. Yes. Hare Krishna.
Guru Maharaj, how can we perform our duty without attachment? Because generally it is some like some kind of inspiration or some kind of motivation is required. So
Our motivation should be to please Krishna first and foremost, isn't it? Otherwise, if the motivation is material, then very often, and for some people, most of the time, it will not be according to our expectation. And then we'll be frustrated. And then we'll be an anxiety, etc. So this is, I guess, a hard lesson for all of us, how to perform activity without being attached. And it is only possible when we see ourselves as, very menial servants of Krishna. How not to be attached in family life? That's another question that is there. I mean, one may say, well, it's natural to be attached as a husband or as a wife, as a father, as a mother. To some extent, there is attachment, but ultimately, and we see wonderful examples in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for example, in the Gaura Lila, of householders. It's not that they did not have affection or love for their wife or children, but they were really situated on this very ideal, okay, it is elevated platform. Becoming a devotee is ultimately our goal and aim for all of us. This cannot be imitated artificially, of course, but we should know, and that's why Bhagavad Gita teaching is there, that's why the Shastras are there, that's why the Acharyas are there. We should know that we must learn this gradual detachment, and we must perform our activities out of a duty without being attached to the result. Our motivation should be our Krishna conscious duty. Now, this chapter speaks about, this very elevated level of consciousness, which, of course, is not at all easy to attain. So there, in one purport, I forget which chapter exactly, but in the Bhagavad Gita, in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada explains that there are two levels in which one can perform activities whereby one can experience or derive great inspiration, satisfaction, and happiness. The obvious one, of course, is those who are, pure, unalloyed devotees of the Lord, those who are Paramahamsas. And we all know that they're quite rare in the material world. It's not at all easy to attain that level, although it is our goal and objective. But obviously one who is on that platform, like Srila Prabhupada, he's always fully content, satisfied, completely transcendental to all situations. So because the majority of us, vast majority, are not on that platform, Prabhupada explains there's another way by which we can become enthusiastic and maintain this high consciousness, and that is by becoming connected to the preaching activities of our acharyas, the preaching activities, ultimately by becoming connected with what is the primary purpose for Krishna's descent in the material world, isn't it? Dharma samstapanarthaya, to reestablish the principles of dharma. So that's why it's very important, since it is not at all easy to be quickly situated on that platform of Paramahamsa. Therefore, we should be connected with the mission of the Lord, and whatever our duty and responsibility is as a husband, as having to earn a living, to support a family, we should take those up as duty and responsibility, but our mind being connected with the bigger picture, so to speak. And in this way, we won't lose sight. So it is dangerous to lower the standard and to be, motivated on the material level or material platform, which is what, of course, is being promoted or advertised in the world. Companies and big businesses and whatnot, they're all enticing or motivating people for some material gain, etc., like that. So it's not so easy to break away from that. It is only possible when we develop our higher understanding, our higher consciousness, and that comes by hearing on a regular basis and following, the recommended practices that are there in devotional service.
Yes, thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. So Prananath Prabhu, unless you have any hands up, I think we're close to our
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
session. Yeah, right. Okay. You're still in Hebri, is it?
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I see. Background is familiar.
So there is one hand up from Anna. I think she has a question.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. One question
Hare
from
Krishna.
overseas. Hare Krishna.
From
Hare
overseas. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please
Hare
accept
Krishna.
my obeisances. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question, please,
Yes.
about family, as being a wife and a mother.
Yes.
I'm finding it hard how to distinguish between love and attachment for them, and how to
Okay. Yes.
see the difference. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Generally, all of us, before we come to Krishna consciousness, or during those initial days, weeks or months, or possibly years, when we come in contact with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, we will have, not only in this lifetime, but attachment and conditioning is something that we have carried with us for many, many, many lifetimes. And therefore, it is not so easy to just break away from that. It is not that when we become Krishna conscious, we develop any kind of, let's say, hatred for family members or other people for that matter. Of course, family, because we have this natural connection. We've been born in a particular family, or we have mothered, we become a mother for our children, etc. So it is by, I would say, continued practice of devotional service, which will gradually help us become more purified, that will allow us to to become more detached from family members and to see them. This is one of the verses that we read today, actually, in this chapter, which ends with Pandita Samadarshinaha. A learned person sees everyone with an equal vision. And therefore, our modern disease, it's not only modern disease, our material disease, is that because we are identifying with a particular family, a particular nation, we develop attachment. But the more we cultivate this knowledge of Krishna consciousness, we will still remain a member of a particular country. We will still remain the mother of particular children, but we will learn to see those children as first and foremost servants of Krishna, as spirit souls. And this vision of, Pandita Samadarshinaha will help us to to see all living entities as Krishna's eternal servants, and will help us to actually become less attached to the particular individuals that are part of our family. That comes gradually. It depends on, of course, each individual. The more we become purified in consciousness, then we will be able to actually detach ourselves from the more, let's say, material affection that is there. Again, it's not that we abandon our role and responsibility, but we just see things in a somewhat different manner that helps us to cope with situations. For example, when catastrophes of course happen all the time in the material world, there are wonderful examples, once again, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, whereby Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had majority of his associates were actually householders. So they all had, they were married, they had children, but we see wonderful examples of whenever something would happen, the head of the family, examples are given for personalities like Shivananda Sen, for example, and Srivas Thakur. We can see that when some calamity happened, they did not become overwhelmed. Affection, Prabhupada does say that it's natural because of having been many years associated with different family members to have some tie, some connection. But the more we are practicing Krishna consciousness, we will not become overwhelmed by situations that will actually overwhelm most people. So it's a question of purified consciousness that will help one to deal with our family situation, our family relations, etc., like that.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. So, Pranana Prabhu, with your kind permission, since you are the host, I cannot close without getting your permission. So I want to thank all the devotees who have taken some time to participate in our reading and hearing from the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and we will again resume with the 6th chapter.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly the date, but it will be the first Sunday of the month of May. I think it's the very beginning of the month of May.
Yes.
Okay. So once again, thank you all very much. Jai Sri Prabhupada ki.
Thank you.
Jai.
Hi.
Hare Krishna.
Thank
Jai.
you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.